Hi everyone, this is Honey Badger Radio and my name is Allison Tiemann. And today I am going to be showing you responding to yet another article. This one is The Real Problem with Cancel Culture by Meghan McArdle, published on the Washington Post. But before I get into that, I want to discuss something that I spoke about at the 2018. Sorry, I got a lot of cats, got a lot of tabs open. And as usual, as soon as I start to talk about anything on here, Mia has to come and say hello. So I apologize for that, but cats are what they are and they will not be denied. But in 2017, I went to the third ICMI, or actually I think it was the second. Well, let's see. 2016 was the second. 2017 was the third. And that one was in Australia. So it was the 2018 ICMI. I spoke at the 2018 ICMI in London. And what I spoke about was what it would take for men's rights and men's issues to be accepted by the greater society, by the mainstream society. And I referenced a book called Crossing the Chasm. Crossing the Chasm. And this is a really, really, really good book. So if you wanted to understand how ideas and technologies are adopted by people, then I really recommend purchasing this book and reading it, because it has been a Bible for really understanding the demographic shifts around adopting new ideas and new technologies. An excellent book, highly recommended if you want to understand that process. Now, what Crossing the Chasm talks about is this phenomenon with new ideas, or the adoption of new ideas. As you can see right here, and I will put this like this. So when a new idea begins, it's first invented, of course, and then it is adopted by a group of people who really enjoy new concepts and they are really excited by any kind of new technology, any kind of that they can bring to any kind of purpose, and they just grab it up and they find all kinds of new ways to work with it. They create support forums, they create all kinds of help files for how you can employ this new technology. The technology itself is sort of in a very imprecise stage, so we don't know exactly what the mainstream use of it is, but people are with it, they're working with it, they're trying to think about the early part of the computer revolution. That would be the innovators, the people who are going to take a new technology and find out what you can do with it, and they really enjoy that. And then you go to the first adopters. So after the innovators, the first adopters are business people who are looking at these new technologies and seeing how they can be applied to new business models. So they take those new concepts, they refine them into a use for business use, but they are able to take those concepts, they're able to give them all the framework they need to be applied in a business context, even though they still may not be refined to the point where they are a consumable product. And then you have what is called the chasm. And this chasm exists between the first adopters and the early majority, because in order to adopt a technology, the early majority has to see other people in the early majority using it. So before it can cross the chasm, it has to have already crossed the chasm. So you can see why that would be an issue with adopting any kind of new idea or new technology. Once again, the early majority needs social proof that the technology is going to work for them, but nobody in the early majority has yet adopted it. So there's that's what creates the chasm. That's what creates the resistance between the first adopters and the early majority. Now, the way that a product gets over the chasm is pain. The authors of Crossing the Chasm, the author of Crossing the Chasm, Geoffrey Moore, used an example of pain being used to get a product across the chasm. there was in pharmaceutical companies, they have to bring a medication to market, and there's all kinds of paperwork that has to happen. And at the time, one particular group of innovators had created this program that facilitated the process of getting the paperwork in and completed, but it hadn't yet been adopted. And it was the pharmaceutical companies that eventually adopted it. And the reason why was because it sped up the process of getting this paperwork delivered and finished. And every day that the paperwork wasn't getting put into, it wasn't getting completed, that was $1 million that they were losing. So they were highly incentivized to adopt this new technology in order to facilitate the process of getting their paperwork finalized, because they were losing $1 million a day, and that's a lot of pain. So they grabbed that particular segment of the market, of the early adopters, grabbed that particular innovative technology and put it to use. And then everybody else who had connections with the pharmaceutical industry or knew somebody started to see them using that technology. And then the rest of the early adopters for the the early majority started to adopt that technology and apply it to their own business problems, their own paperwork business problems. And then suddenly you saw it adopted by the entire marketplace. But it needed to have that initial bit of pain before that group of people, or that business that had that pain, that incentivized them to grab onto that technology and use it to solve the pain that they were experiencing. So the critical point is that to get across, for an idea to get from the first adopters, very first people interested in it, and the innovators are the ones who explored all of the nooks and crannies of the ideas and really brought it to full fruition. And then the first adopters started to apply it to the greater world around them. In order to get from the first adopters to the early majority, you need a lot of pain. And your idea needs to solve that pain. And what I was talking about, and for your interest, the early majority adopts it after it goes past this chasm. The late majority eventually adopts it when it's gotten significantly more social proof. And finally, the laggards adopt it when it's more painful not to. So that's the life cycle for the adoption of an innovative idea or technology. Now, how that applies to the men's issues community? Well, the way that I explained it is I addressed the audience and I said, think about the pain that you had to undergo in order to even consider men's issues, to start to recognize men's issues, to start to understand or even question society and how society dealt with men's issues. Consider that amount of pain. For many men and women as well, for men, it was losing access to their children, losing their livelihood, being zeroed out in their life. So they would lose their house, they might lose their job, they might lose their children, and that was a huge amount of pain. And that's what compelled them to cross the chasm and realize that there was something wrong. Not just realize that there might be men's issues. Like many of us have the experience of just bringing it up with someone and they say, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then the next 10 minutes, it's like they haven't even heard it. Because it doesn't matter to them. It doesn't compel them to action. So in this case, crossing the chasm is not just recognizing men's issues, but allowing them to compel you to action. And it took a lot of pain for a lot of men and a lot of women. With women, it's usually watching a man who's close to you go through these kind of difficult and very trying circumstances. But it takes a lot of pain to get us over the chasm. All right, get us over the chasm. It takes pain to get us over, to get us over the chasm. All right. Now, what I pointed out is that in order for the early majority to start in society, to start adopting men's issues, there has to be sufficient pain for them to be incentivized to do it, to start recognizing that men's issues, not just that men's issues matter, but that we need to do something about them. There needs to be pain to incentivize them to cross the chasm. And at the time, I said that the kind of pain that can incentivize people to cross the chasm might be, for example, a culture in which everybody is judging everybody else. There is no set ethical standard. It's always about appearance of virtue and morality. And every time you have the least bit of failing, you are ejected out of that. So eventually, with that negative spiral of everybody watching everybody else for any sign of lapse, or even a previous historical lapse in the moral formulation or the moral commandments, if they have a lapse, and then they're immediately ejected out of the culture and socially ostracized, and they lose their job. And I was saying that experience of being part of a culture in which everybody is watching everybody else for a misstep so that they can mob them, crucify them, and eject them, eventually will lead to a situation where there's basically two people in that culture, two people left in that culture, and both of them are trying desperately to throw the other out of it. That's not a way to create a sense of belonging. It's not a way to create anything but excruciating agony. And just to use an example from my own life, in 2014, I went to the Sask Expo in Saskatoon. And there was a fairly large webcomic creator there, a couple booths down, who took an interest in my comic. And so he came over to talk about it. And he himself was what you might consider to be a social justice warrior. And we spoke a bit back and forth, and he admitted to me that even though he doesn't agree with me, he feels safer talking to me than he does anybody on his quote-unquote side. They terrify him. So he thinks he's trying to get a sense of belonging from people who he finds absolutely terrifying to be around. People he can't trust. People he can't even feel any kind of sense of security from. You can't create a sense of belonging there. All you can create is, once again, you can't create a group. You can't create stability. All you can create is this churn of endless pain. But pain is what gets people across the chasm. So let's look at the churn of endless pain and a particular person who is currently trying to call it out, as it were, but maybe not sufficiently. All right. So Meghan, let me get this up. Meghan McArdle, the real problem with cancel culture. Okay. The online cancel culture of Twitter mobs, public shamings, and the occasional public firing has become pretty unpleasant of late. And unsurprisingly, people whose job it is to say things resent being hushed. It's become pretty unpleasant of late. Oh, it's been unpleasant for a while. It's only just started to hit the intelligentsia. It's been hitting everybody outside of that. I mean, everyone now has a story of being canceled if you're not on the left or not perceived to be on the left. You all have a story of being canceled. I have a story of being canceled, of being evicted from an expo for speaking the wrong words at a panel or to a topic that the panelists brought up, and having my booth evicted. I mean, everybody listening probably knows that story. So this cancel culture didn't just start. It's just that it's now started to hit Meghan McArdle. And it's because, once again, that negative spiral of people finding targets. The only way they generate a sense of belonging is by finding a target to evict from their group, to scapegoat and evict from their group. That has hit the intelligentsia that Meghan McArdle is part of. Hence the letter published this week by Harper's Magazine, in which 153 writers and public intellectuals warned the widespread cancellation is chilling the free exchange of ideas. Also, the cancel culture right now, the intelligentsia is sort of presenting this. And you'll notice if you go on Twitter, you'll see more and more intelligentsia starting to get woke, get red pilled on cancel culture. You know, when it was just Alex Jones, and I guess the most recent one was Molyneux. When it was those people, you know, they could sort of get behind it. But now they're canceling intellectuals that they respect, and suddenly it's become a problem. Of course, it's not going to stop here because there's nothing to stop it. There's no force that opposes, well, there is, but they don't see any force or moral schema that can oppose the self-righteousness of cancel culture. So enjoy this, Meghan McArdle, because it's not stopping. And it's not stopping because you've embraced the fundamental principles behind cancel culture. You let it start with the people that you didn't like. They gained a war chest of power, and then they went after you. And it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop till once again, this entire culture has just got two people in it, two people of good standing left in it, both of which are trying to besmirch the other. That's a little bit of hyperbole. It probably will just collapse completely before then. Indeed, it is. It's so funny because she's writing this after there have been years of contracting the free exchange of ideas. Like, they've contracted with each person that YouTube and Twitter has canceled, and these mobs have canceled. They contract it further and further and further. And once the contraction is suddenly at her doorstep, she's starting to take notice. Well, it's too late. Meghan, you are also going to be canceled, and you're probably going to be canceled for this article. Indeed it is. I've been hearing from people, center-left, as well as center-right, oh, how gracious of you, who have moved from astonishment to concern to terror as senior editors were fired for running op-eds written by conservative senators or approving inept headlines, as professors were investigated for offenses such as reading aloud the words of Martin Luther King, as a major arts foundation imploded because its statement of support for Black Lives Matter was judged insufficiently enthusiastic. These people that's a lot of pain. These people were becoming afraid of their own colleagues who might, if they feel they're not being listened to, leak internal communications to friendly websites or organize a public protest on Twitter. I think we can all recognize these happenings and that they're not exclusive to the intelligentsia. Twitter's reaction to the letter seemed to illustrate these concerns. Unsurprisingly, the letter triggered some of the very tactics it implicitly condemns. To the panicked defenders of the old liberal order, it was a self-rebuttal of progressive claims, that they weren't trying to stifle free expression, even of anodyne sentiments like, do they have to use these? Okay, let me just look up what anodyne means. Anodyne. Oh, goodness. I can't even spell this word. It's so... I mean, I use a lot of multiple syllable words, so I can't really say anything, but this is definitely one I've never seen before. Not likely to provoke dissent or offense, inoffensive, often deliberately so. So inoffensive statements, like why we couldn't use the word inoffensive there, I don't know. To the panicked defenders of the old liberal order, it was a self-rebuttal of progressive claims that they weren't trying to stifle free expression, even of innocuous statements like, the way to defeat bad ideas is by exposure, argument, and persuasion, not by trying to silence or wish them away. Okay, so apparently the panicked defenders of the old liberal order are trying to rebut progressive claims that they weren't trying to stifle free expression. So they're rebutting the progressive claims that they're not trying to... Of course they're trying to stifle free expression. Or rather, they're trying to use it in order to stifle people. So people can freely express themselves, but as they constantly say, freedom of speech is not freedom for consequence, which doesn't really make any sense, because it isn't exactly free speech if you get jailed for it. Is it free speech if you get shot in the head for expressing... But apparently it is free speech. That seems like it's more like trap speech. So, you're free to speak whatever you want. We'll shoot you in the head for it. because it's a trap. Okay. Coincidentally, this controversy erupted just after Osita Nuvanu of the New Republic had published one of the best defenses of cancel culture, justifying it as an exercise of vital First Amendment rights, not just to express displeasure with the words of others, but freely associate with like-minded people, which implies the right not to associate either. For the backers of the letter, Nuwanu offers a useful clarification. Free speech has turned into a fight about institutional norms and associational privileges, not just civil rights. The arguments may overlap with the civil rights debate, but the points difference matter. To be clear, I'm not neutral in this institutional fight. The cancelers aren't merely trying to expand the range of acceptable ideas so that it includes more marginalized voices. They are pressuring mainstream institutions which serve as society's ideas curators. Okay, there's one of your problems. Mainstream institutions do not serve as society's idea curators. They shouldn't serve as society's idea curators. I don't need you to curate that information or ideas for me that I can have access to. No, thank you. Even if you hide it behind curation, you are promoting authoritarian control over information. And the media doesn't deserve that. They haven't shown that they are trustworthy with it. They're pressuring mainstream institutions, which serve as society's idea curators, to adopt a much narrower definition of reasonable opinion. Oh, I see. So it's a problem now that you are on the wrong side of a reasonable opinion. But before, people like me, that's okay. Even though my great sin is to have a different analysis of gender dynamics than feminism. It's like feminism they have found the truth and the only truth about how the genders relate throughout history, and they will be right from now to the end, to the time that the sun is a burnt cinder in the sky. They cannot be not right. Okay. The new rules would exclude the viewpoints of many Americans. Yes, because you have invited the vampire in. And she won't be satiated until she has sucked everyone dry. And everyone has been evicted from what is acceptable. I mean, this is it. It's all you have taken the free marketplace of ideas, and you have turned it into a competition between who can be the most woke. And every other idea, aside from the most woke in this instant, is wrong. And everybody who espouses them needs to be thrown out. You've turned it into some sort of Machiavellian hierarchy of competing wokeness. And there's no exchange here. The only thing that happens after the free exchange is the consequence, right? Someone exchanges an idea and then suddenly this moment it's the wrong one. We're going to cancel them. Well, that comes out of the constant competition. The constant never-ending churn of competition over who can be the most woke. And competition over how quickly you can eject anybody who suddenly the fortunes have shifted and they've become less woke. Just because the rules have come for you now doesn't mean that it wasn't a problem years ago. Intellectual monocultures are inherently unhealthy. And the tactics by which the new orthodoxy is being imposed are destructive. But I'm enough of an old school liberal to think that I have to persuade my opponents, and I doubt they'll be moved by one more anthem to the glories of open inquiry. It's so funny, because we would never have gotten to this point without open inquiry, without the ability to criticize institutions. They would never have been empowered to create this woke culture without the ability to criticize institutions. They might, however, consider a few pragmatic problems with imposing their code by Twitter force. Twitter, with its 280-character limit, is not a medium for making lengthy, nuanced arguments. It's most effective at signaling the things you can't say. Or making really pithy, biting insights into people's cognitive dissonance, which is what I like to do on Twitter. Consider the ultimate Twitter put-down. Delete your account. How about no? That's especially a problem for institutions that are in the business of making arguments, effectively handing over the reins of power to the Twitter sphere, as seems to be happening, means offering control to those who are especially adept at not making arguments. Well, yeah. All they do is just presume bad faith and then get their mob to accept their presumptive bad faith, and then you're done for. Because it's not about free exchange of ideas. It's about using words as weapons in a game of who can be the last person standing. Too late. This is your life now, Meghan. You got nothing to stop it. Nothing. Because you're on the wrong side of the chasm. All right. More broadly, this approach is at odds with what makes any institution function as more than a collection of self-supervising individuals. When much of your workforce is worried about summary firing, they put more and more effort into protecting themselves and less effort into advancing the work of the institution. Yeah, okay, these people aren't interested in maintaining this. Okay, I don't think you're getting this. The point of all of this is destruction. Now, some of them think that they're going to have their shitty sequel at the end of all of this destruction, of aka communism, the thing that we've never tried. No, we've tried it. We've tried it. They think that that's going to happen. It's not what's going to happen. It's just going to be destruction. But a lot of them just want to tear everything down. And why not? Like, if you're a young man, what do you have to look forward to? You're not even allowed to have your own identity because it's toxic. And don't give me the, we believe that there's... No, you don't. The people who are promoting this toxic masculinity narrative, I never identify anything positive about masculinity. So these young men don't even have access to an identity. And as Marshall McLuhan has said, when people don't have an identity, they resort to violence and destruction. So that's what's happening here. You took away young men's identity and they just want to destroy everything. And also you took away young women's identities as well in a lot of ways. So they want to destroy things in the way that women destroy things, which is morally. Just destroy their right to even exist. And then everybody else, burning them as an afterthought. All right. Doubly so, and the fact that institutions can't maintain under this pain the level of this corrosive acid, well, that's just a bonus, if not the point for a lot of these people. So good luck appealing to their desire to maintain these institutions. Doubly so when it's fellow employees who are pressing public attacks, as happened with the Twitter insurrection against a New York Times op-ed by Senator Tom Cotton. Cotton had called for deploying the military to control riots. Outraged staffers responded through coordinated tweets. They're a bit tittish, but coordinated tweets which read, "Running this puts black at New York Times staff in danger." All right. Though it was framed in the language of workplace safety, this was the kind of critical pressure campaign that was normally run by outsiders, not insiders, customers, not workers. In this, they are demonstrating a growing tendency that conservative policy maven Yuval Levin recently identified among American elites. People treating their institutions as platforms for personal performance rather than a group effort with its own larger work. Yes, turning work into a game of virtue signaling and piety. Yeah, creating workplaces into stages in which people perform their piety does tend to destroy them. But which gender likes to do that most? Maybe that's why women were originally kept out of the workplace. Because they are drawn to performances of piety and virtue signaling which impede the construction of an identity around a form of work. So people go to work and they identify with the work that they're doing, and they identify with the company, and they identify with the group, and they want to build it and make it better. Do the work of maintaining the institution, not virtue signal, and certainly not virtue signal about how the institution is evil. You know, and you all sort of need that sort of masculine focus on bonding through work in order to maintain institutions. But instead we're getting more and more of that feminine piety. Everywhere I go is a stage to display myself as a pious and someone with contrition, you know, a pious person who has virtue and will call out the lack of virtue of others. Okay. There may be a deeper thing at foot here. That's a tendency Twitter encourages, and not just among journalists or academics. The foremost example is President Trump. Oh boy, this is going to be fun. Yeah, Twitter is basically the modern manifestation of rage. In fairness, the insiders of cancel culture might say that they have no choice. Twitter was their only way to accelerate urgent value shifts that might otherwise have taken decades. They're right that Twitter speeds everything up, and they're right that causes like racial equality are urgent. And also that white, straight, cisgender liberals always seem to be asking marginalized people to wait till they get around to fixing things. Oh boy. And yet, even the critics clearly recognize that there is great value in these institutions. They may also recognize that there are reasons that institutions favor incremental internal change. If you hold these sorts of fights on a public and inherently limited platform, then some part of your audience will inevitably wonder whether the ensuing consensus, such as it is, reflects what people actually think, rather than what they are afraid of. Oh, it sucks to be on that side of the chasm, doesn't it? This is the most milquetoast. She can't come right out and say it. It's like, you guys are fucked. You are a bunch of psychos. And you use every possible moral language to try to bludgeon each other in order to get a crumb of belonging from the feeling of ejecting another human being out of social acceptance. You are literally addicted. Like, these people are literally addicted to the dopamine high of just savaging another person's reputation. Oh, it must feel so good. They're basically just crushing them and snorting them like freaking addicts. And again, what's going to stop it? I mean, seriously, what's going to stop it? After all, we live in a horrible patriarchy. All institutions are part of a horrible patriarchy that oppresses women for the benefit of men. So what justification do any of them have to exist, my dear Megan? Even no matter how attached you might be to the power of the institution that you are a part of, it no longer has any justification for it to exist, as it is an instrument of patriarchy, which you no doubt agree with. Well, shucks. The checks can do on that particular belief system. All right. So achieving victory this way risks damaging the ultimate prize. Okay, Megan, you think that this is the ultimate prize, right? Which is the power those institutions have as institutions, not as just as algorithmic amplifiers. The power is rooted in the perception that they are patient accumulators, and yes, the occasional revisionists of something broad enough to be called mainstream discourse. Oh my. This fraction on my face is pure schadenfreude. I know it makes me a petty person, but I'm sorry, Megan. You're not going to be able to preserve your institutions. Because, to be quite frank, what right do you have to preserve them? After all, your institutions are institutions of racism. And before that, they were institutions of patriarchal oppression of women. They were made for the express benefit of men at the expense of women, Megan. I mean, no matter how many patriarchal bargains you make with your institution, that fact remains. It has no legitimacy in existing. You are likely one of the many people who have put that narrative out and who have adhered to it, have fought for it, for whatever selfish reason, whatever thing you thought you got from it. Well, here's the check. The intersectionals marching through your institutions, declaring them illegitimate and tearing them to pieces, this is the check come due for feminism. And I've been saying this for years now. You cannot teach this narrative and expect society to continue, because it removes all legitimacy from society. And eventually you will hit a tipping point where people will feel it more legitimate to tear everything down than to prop it up. And you are at that point. Enjoy the pain on your side of the chasm. It's that power, not the names on the doors, that lets those institutions establish the boundaries the cancelers are really hoping to control, not just of what people are willing to say in public, but what they are willing to believe. Ooh. Ow! Jeez! What gives you the right, Megan? What gives your institutions the right to have that power over what we believe? That really sounds like you think you are some kind of religion. You're some kinds of priests and priestesses officiating over religious belief and religious institutions rather than institutions of pure truth. I mean, and to be honest, people want religions, that's fine. But you're presenting yourselves as institutions of truth, not institutions of what people need to believe in order to be morally good. Because it seems to me that presenting yourselves as what people need to believe in order to be morally good, rather than here are the facts, ma'am, make of them what you will, sort of leads directly to cancel culture, don't you think? Yeah, we are the institutions that we're in charge of what's morally good to think and believe. We are the ones in charge. She's really she's just pulling up her skirts and showing her ass right here, and the asses of the entire liberal media establishment. You guys really thought you were the moral arbiters of what people would believe, and you thought you would get away with it. It wasn't though for those pesky intersectional kids. It just exposed the whole thing. Oh man, and then just started marching their muddy boots through it. You know what? They don't care. Oh, this is the end. Okay. All right, so this looks interesting. Jennifer Rubin, 10 rules to preserve common sense in the debate about free speech. Maybe another time. All right. They don't care. The joy of destruction is in them, and that is what they will do. All right. So let's see if I got any super chats discussing this. I mean, it's astounding to me that, I mean, she just like, yeah, we're you don't want to kill us because we determine what people believe. The media determines what people believe. To be quite frank, I'm sort of rooting for the intersectionals now over you, Megan. I think that I would rather see all of this swept away in a wave of chaos than continue to be ruled by people like you. People who think they are so arrogant, they think they have the right to rule us like that. Unbelievable. Anyway. All right, so I got one super chat. Richard Beer gives us $4.99 and says, so at what point do they decide to have their version of Inquisition backed by an official power? I think we're at that point. To be honest, I think they probably have to make better inroads with the police and the soldiers to actually get the liberal media would have to work on their relationship to institutions of military power to start up a real inquisition. And I don't think they really have. So, all right. I will see if Brian would like to come on to talk to me briefly. So that was interesting, wasn't it? Anybody else want to send through a super chat and I'll respond to it? In the meantime, it's just what I wanted to point out. What I wanted to point out from all of this is that the liberal intelligentsia is experiencing the pain. Now, the first people who experienced the pain were us crossing the chasm. Because there's a connection to all of it. There's a connection to men's issues, the denial of men's issues, the denial of men's rights, the pain between the fact that you have to experience pain to get to this point, to start to recognize and understand these concepts. All of the stuff that we talk about here on Honey Badger Radio is the stuff that has been thrown out in order to pursue a particular narrative. And that narrative is the narrative that delegitimizes all social institutions, ultimately, including the liberal media. And what we've seen over the last few years is that narrative progressively delegitimizing more and more types of thought. It started really with the conservatives, but it started with the men's rights activists, because we were what needed to be removed in order for feminism to be weaponized, in order for feminism to weaponize women's vulnerability on a wide scale and start destroying stuff and delegitimizing stuff. And then it moved from us to conservatives to center right, and now it's hitting the liberal intelligentsia in the media. And it's like, well, it's all a manifestation of this narrative that delegitimizes everything except destruction. Like you can't continuously talk about how society was constructed for men's benefit at the expense of women without legitimating the destruction of all of society. And what we're seeing is we're just seeing the end result of all of that. I mean, it's incredibly irresponsible. It was an incredibly irresponsible invention. You can see the declaration of sentiments, and then later in the second wave, all of this invention by these incredibly powerful and well-connected women. You know, this is not something that's sustainable, and it's the check is coming due, and it's finally come due to the liberals who created it itself. And I'm going to go further into why that all is and explain it at a further date. But we got some more super chats, so thank you. Still seeing. Just give me a second here. I got to get it all set up so that I can have a chat with Brian when he comes in. But let me just see here. Video insert. Nope. That's not what I want to do. This is what I want to do. Okay, here we go. Hopefully, oh goodness. You know, OBS is really interesting because sometimes you'll do something and everything will change and you will not know why. Okay, so essentially, I have no idea why that changed completely. It's very odd. Okay, so here we go.
I'm here, but for some reason...
Yeah, I know you're not...
I'm here, but my video isn't working, and I can't hear you. You seem to be muted.
That's fine. I will unmute myself. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. But I don't know why my video isn't. It's like trying to... Oh, you know what? Hold on a second.
I
know why.
Yeah, sorry guys. This is going to be a little bit of... You're going to have to see a little...
Whatever. I got it.
Little of the background work here as I attempt to redo all of the stuff that I did prior to even going live. So this happened to you too, Brian? Like it just randomly decides to be like, I'm not going to work now.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah, this stuff isn't super dependable, but looks like you got it.
Yeah. Yeah, the work of rapidly trying to redo my work. Okay, let's see what it looks like here. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so I'm back in, you're back in, we can talk. So we'll talk about,
okay.
So what I just got through talking about is the concept of, you remember the demographic adoption of new ideas? I've talked to you about it before. It goes from the first, the innovators to the first adopters, and then there's a chasm, and then it goes to the early majority and the late majority, and then the laggards. I have a handy little, remember this? Oops, wrong way.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And then the chasm, in order to get people across the chasm, you need pain. And I was just talking about how in order for the mainstream to start accepting men's the stuff we talk about, they need to experience pain. And this cancel culture that this Meghan from the Washington Times is talking about, or is it the Washington Post? Apologies, guys. I'm just going to check this. Is the pain, the Washington Post, is the pain that is required for people to start moving themselves across the chasm to the side where all of the information that they've refused to look at in order to construct the narrative that was weaponized, that's currently marching through their institutions. You get what I'm saying? Like feminism, in order to construct feminism, all of the issues that men's issues advocates and men's rights activists talk about had to become taboo in mainstream discourse. So they were shoved to the side. And then what ended up happening is women's victimhood became weaponized. And it was weaponized to delegitimize and in order to take moral control over institutions and people and everything. But the problem is that eventually that has to come due because you've just delegitimized all of society, which means eventually there's going to come somebody who's going to be like, you know what? If all of society is delegitimized, then let's tear it down because none of it is legitimate. None of it is morally legitimate. So that has come due in the form of cancel culture. So she is suffering from the very narrative that she no doubt promoted for ages in order to gain personal benefit from. And you see what I'm saying? And that suffering itself will eventually, if it doesn't destroy society first, compel people to cross the chasm and start to look at the information that they have discarded in order to pursue this narrative. And I know that's really complicated. So if you guys don't understand, just send me questions. I really suffer at trying to be able to manage all of this, but so if you could just send me super chats because it's easier for me to see them. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the super chats. Are you able to see them, or do I need to do something, or do you even care? Because I can read them.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I don't see them, so go ahead and read them.
All right, I'll read them.
I'm not in your back room.
No, you're not.
That's not what I meant.
I know that's not what you meant. Okay, Talleyrand gives us $5 or $4.99 and says, "So are our institutions legit? Which ones are they?" I don't have an answer for you. Like most of them seem to be absorbed in self-destruction. They just want to promote this idea. They want to promote the moral idea that they oppress women for men. And then it's just like, I'm just astounded because most of our institutions, academic, government, media, are promoting this narrative that institutions, like we exist in a society that benefits men over women, and institutions are organs of that patriarchy. And then they're just doing the surprised Pikachu face as there's a whole bunch of people that now want to tear institutions down. Well, duh. So are institutions legitimate? I mean, I guess that question doesn't really matter because they have decided that they want to die. And institutions that decide that they want to die, they have chosen, their destructor. They have chosen the god of destruction that will now come and destroy them. And the first thing a legitimate institution has to do is want to survive. So, I don't know. Yeah. I can't answer that question. Nick G 1883 gives us €2 and says, "Strange world, isn't it?" Yeah.
Allison?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit strange. Here, now you can see me, so you can see me. Oops, no, I gotta... Oh, goodness, why did you do that?
You do. You don't have to show anything. I can just look at the video.
Okay. Yes. All right. Now I apologize to everybody who had to endure that little bit of technical difficulty. All right. Richard Breer gives us another $4.99 and says, "No one expects the Spanish Inquisition." Nope. And no one expects to be murdered by themselves either. I mean, it's the last person you would suspect, you know. And it wouldn't be suicide, it would be murder, you know. Self-murder, not suicide. It'd be just like this random self-execution. You never suspect yourself. Kill yourself sleepwalking or something, you know. I don't know.
There was a meme. That was going around a while back. Don't trust anyone, including yourself. Of like a boy with a picture of himself pointing a gun at the back of his own head.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. This is sort of
meme, but it's an old meme, sir. But it checks out.
Yeah, and well, I mean, it's applicable here. So all memes that are applicable are once again alive. But I think the media is basically that. They're just, and they're surprised about it. They're like, whoa, how could embracing the idea that all institutions are organs of the patriarchy and the patriarchy benefits men over women and hates women, how could that have possibly backfired on us as an institution?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a mystery. So are institutions legitimate? Well, for the first part, maybe they should have a sense of survival instinct, 1. And 2, not pursue stupid crap like that. Then they might be more legitimate. All right. Dragon Noodle Soup Gaming says, let's start referring to intersectionals as the Inquisition. They'll love that. You know, I think the Inquisition had more due process, actually. And I know it sounds surprising, but it's entirely possible. Because people who falsely accused, I don't know how they determine this, but you could actually be jailed for falsely accusing someone of being a witch or a heretic. So there you go. Talaranti gives us $4.99. What about Mary Wollstonecraft's pre-declaration of sentiments? I think I mentioned that. Did you mean what about it? Well, yeah, it was also sort of this proto earthquake, the pre-shocks of the earthquake. You know, they were there. There's always been women who've had resentment towards their social role in society. You know, probably I would have been one of them back then, because I certainly have resentment about it now. I don't want to play a victim for feminists. Okay, The Great Endures 79 gives us €5 and says, there is no turning back to the upcoming destruction, is there? Do you think that we can get to a more decentralized world where we can rebuild? You know, to be honest, I wonder if the destruction, like, everybody's like, oh, the oncoming destruction and the Civil War. Maybe all that's happened is that people will turn off, like, Facebook and Twitter will be declared enemies of the state and, like, removed completely. And then everything will come back to normal. What do you think of that, Brian?
What you say that again?
I said that maybe Facebook and Twitter will just be canceled as enemies of the state. And that'll be the coming destruction.
Maybe. I don't know. I think if things get serious enough, people will probably not be spending their time on social media, which could cause those institutions to collapse. So, but maybe things will have to get pretty serious before that happens. Or when the next generation, I think that one of the reasons why social media has so much of a presence these days is because the majority of the people that use it are, they still think of it as some massive technological marvel that they just can't help, implement or use in their daily life. But I think that the younger generation, Generation Z and whatever comes after that, they, according to what I've seen, they actually don't have as much of an interest in social media, and they tend to prefer real life interactions. So it's possible that it may just die off, and this could just be like a phase.
Okay, Gotcha. Yeah, that might be good. Might just be a phase, or maybe we'll have to cancel the internet for a bit. Just go back to BBS, BBSs and news groups and just start over.
Yeah.
With some sort of document. Maybe there'll be the wanderers of the internet desert who will write a new Bible. Don't create a platform where people can only talk in 280 characters. It leads to bad news. All right, so Tally Ranty gave us another $4.99 and said, so what would a positive future for schooling look like? That seems like the most critical institution. And tangential to Vidya. A positive, probably homeschooling at this point. I don't see where it's going to go. Like, I'm pretty sure we're going to be either struggling with COVID if it's a genuine thing, or with, the bear bug if it's a genuine thing for years, because that's the way pandemics usually wash out. Or if it's a panic, then we'll be struggling for it for decades. Because panics take a while. To be quite frank, pandemics, over in a couple of years. Panics tend to take decades. So, there you go. But so I think homeschooling is probably what we're going to need, what we're going to end up with going forward.
I think homeschooling is making a big comeback anyways. So
yeah,
that, and once I think parents that are involved with their children or homeschooling them, they will probably come to realize, especially if their child was in public school, that their kids are learning more with them than they were in class.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm telling you that there's a very good chance that that's true. Like, I would argue, like, nearly 100% chance. And when they see that, they're probably, hopefully, they will get more involved with what their child is learning. I know the conversation about school choice is always going on. So, yeah, I think that homeschooling and charter schools are making a comeback. So,
all right. So Tyler Preston gives us $5 and says, the people who claim that cancel culture is not real always seem to be justifying it by making these straw men being total something-ist phobe. Well, yeah. I mean, it's a perfect gig, right? I punch you in the face, and then you say, stop punching me in the face, and I say, fists aren't real. You conspiracy theorist. Perfect. All right. The Great Indoors 1979 gives us €5 and says, I've seen YouTuber uneducated economists talk about cashless society and negative interest rates, which will force people to spend their earnings. I'm guessing there's going to be another one because this is 1 out of 2.
Yeah.
Cashless society and negative interest rates, which will force people to spend their earnings. Oy. That's unpleasant, because the thing is that forcing people to spend their earnings makes them even more vulnerable to economic downturns and more reliant on handouts. Like, why would... that just doesn't even make sense. Yeah. Also, I'm having an interesting phenomenon where if I navigate away from OBS, it stops your image.
Yeah, you can't. No. It still plays. It doesn't stop for everybody. So don't worry about that.
Okay.
But that's just so that it saves on your OBS, processing. The Great Indoors, he added another super chat for €5. So he continues. He says, almost immediately, and in ways that government wants, will this speed up the development of men stepping out of their roles as breadwinners? Yeah, that's basically the whole thing. I would imagine so. I mean, men borderline have almost no incentive to be breadwinners now, so that's only going to make things worse.
Yeah, it's sort of difficult to really justify men becoming breadwinners because they don't really have any, like, what's the reward for it, really?
Yeah, they get almost nothing.
Almost nothing.
At this point. So. Yeah.
Okay. Well, unless there's any more super chats, which I think that is our last one. I want to. Oh, let's talk about the news. What were the news items that you were going to be talking about tonight? Let's get a little preview going.
All right. Well, okay. So on tonight's HBR news show over on the other channel, Badger live streams, we're going to talk about some recent developments and just like the general story of the NCFM vice president and men's rights lawyer, general civil rights lawyer, really, Mark Angelucci. There have been some developments regarding his murder and we will be sharing them on today's news show. It truly is tragic. I had the extreme fortune of hosting a stream over on Regarding Men. That's on the Facebook page with Paul Elam, Tom Golden, Warren Farrell, Cassie J, Steven Svoboda, Janice Fiamengo, and many, many other people who all knew Mark and had nothing but fond memories of him. And so I've learned a couple of things, and we're basically just trying to stay on top of this story because we don't want it to disappear into the memory hole. In addition, there have been some new developments regarding the Ghislaine Maxwell story. Ghislaine Maxwell, in case you guys don't know and you're living under a rock, was a confidant and worked very closely with Jeffrey Epstein, the accused, I guess you could say, like the accused maybe pedophile, sex trafficker, or whatever, who owned Lolita Island. And Ghislaine Maxwell was not only someone that worked for him and sort of helped him organize, but it is said by many that she also participated in this sexual exploitation of underage children. So they've been moving her from cell to cell in an effort to protect her from assassination. I mean, suicide. We also have the new developments regarding Betsy DeVos and Title IX, where Democrat Department of Education members are exaggerating and trying to use fear-mongering on students to warn them that what Betsy DeVos is doing in terms of her changes to Title IX, which are actually quite moderate, will in fact result in lots and lots of girls getting raped. Yeah, I know. And then lastly, we wanted to end on something a little bit silly. There's a story of a man in Oregon who stole a vehicle and was driving it from police as he was like on the run. He actually was caught when his vehicle crashed into another vehicle that was being driven by a woman. And the interesting twist is that vehicle was also stolen. So these were two car thieves that ran into each other. I think there's a romantic comedy in there somewhere, but
meet cute, smash cute.
So.
Oh goodness.
But those are the stories we have for the news show.
Awesome. That sounds awesome. So if you want to go check out the news show, go to Badger live streams on YouTube, and it'll be the next live show coming up. And I'll also put a link if you send me a link, Brian, I'll put it in the low bar too.
Yeah, sure.
And just go to low bar. And also, if you enjoy the content, we have our monthly fundraiser ongoing. It is right here somewhere. And if you go there, you can help us out to make sure that Brian, Prim, and Hannah are funded for the month of July. And that would be a really great help. It is also at feedthebadger.com/projects/badger-media-blitz. And let me see if I can remember how Brian always ends it. If you enjoy this content, hit like Chan, subscribe, share it around, because it's good stuff. We're the only ones offering this kind of analysis. It's very unique, I think, to actually make the connection between men's issues and everything we're seeing in the world, which, I mean, it seems obvious to me. After all, you can't really assert this idea that all of society is constructed for the benefit of men at the expense of women and is an expression of hatred of women without sort of encouraging the destruction of your own society. And maybe this whirlwind of destruction that's now got Meghan and the Washington Post in its sights might just have been created by them embracing that narrative in the first place. So the checks come due. Welcome to the pain, Meghan and the Washington Post. Welcome to the pain. All right. Thank you for your kind attention. I really appreciate it. And keep watching.